I would like to pass the floor to Vivian Solomon, who is the Justice of the Supreme Court of the Republic of Sierra Leone. Thank you.
Is this one? Yes, this.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for inviting me to this conference. And I'm pleased to be here on this blessed day of Our Lady of Guadalupe and to celebrate it in prayer and tranquility. Thank you. My presentation will be brief. I wonder why it's going up and down. It shouldn't be. Yes.
Here, just this one.
I want to go up.
Yes, go up.
Up.
Going down.
Yes. Yes. Now we have similar experiences with my sister from Benin. I've heard a presentation and it's almost the same as what we encounter in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is a small country in West Africa with borders to Guinea and Liberia. We are a source country, a transit country, and a destination country for human trafficking. The vulnerable men and women, but most of them are women. We have over 57% cases of women. The reason why the number is high on women is because women are usually encouraged and being led astray as to greener pastures to work in household work. After that, they are being exploited. We also have children who are being offered education and work, and they are moved from one place to the other, and they are used for trafficking. We also have the issue of surrogacy, which is not so common but is growing now, and very many women are not aware of it. They're being used without their knowledge, knowing that it's surrogacy. And we have forced labor. From and to where are these victims trafficked? As my colleague has said from Benin, it's mainly from the rural areas, the provinces, and they're brought to the urban areas, the cities. The victims, particularly children, are told that they will be going to school. The women, they will be given work to do. They don't need to do any more agricultural work or to stay in the home as a housewife. They will be earning a living, and so they are brought to the cities. The issue about the children is a peculiar one because we lack, and I think most countries in the African continent do not have the logistical support for registration of children, particularly in schools. For example, as a child will be going into a school, and all of a sudden this child doesn't go to school anymore. The principal will not make inquiries, the parents are not asked, nobody cares, it's just like, oh, probably the child has gone somewhere else, the child has relocated, and no eyebrows are risen up about the absence of this child from school. Whereas in most developed countries, when a child doesn't go to school for one day or the second day, the parents are being asked. The school authorities will make inquiries as to the whereabouts of that child, and a medical report might be requested in some cases. So you cannot just move your child from where your child is going to school to anywhere you want them to go to school. Now, some of the victims are transported out of Sierra Leone, most of them are, and they're taken to other West African countries for onward transportation outside of the African continent. probably to Libya, and then off to Italy or some other country. The children are being used as adopted children, and they're taken overseas. I want to emphasize here that we also have cases where legitimate adoption of children are being made. Applications are being made for children to be adopted. And when they're taken out of the country, something else happens to these children. They are used as slaves in the houses, they're taken to household work, they don't go to school, or they're sometimes exploited. So these situations too arise. And we have the same form of exploitation like most other countries do. We have prostitution, we have domestic servitude, fishing, and agriculture. We have forced labor in mining, that is predominantly by the young boys. They go to mine in the promise that if you find a diamond, because we're a diamond country, you will be making a lot of money, and they force them to work there. Domestic servitude is being used mainly for the girls and the women. Forced marriages, surrogacy. We still have child marriages, even though it has been abolished by the Child Rights Act of 2007. We have rock breaking. Rock breaking is being done by both men and women, children in the family, just to make ends meet. Street crime. We have artisanal diamond and granite mining. We have begging, pottering, and adoption. We all have those common forms like other African countries. But we have the World Hope Organization, which has set up a body in Sierra Leone, and they operate to recover. They have a center now for survivors, so they try to get the survivors and to bring them to the center. They try to give them an opportunity to live a life in dignity and hope. We have, at the moment, 58 village parent groups that identify and respond to these cases. And there is a link with local law enforcement, including tribal and chiefdom authorities, police, etc. I want to state that if we do not have all the stakeholders on board, we cannot combat trafficking. We need to have all the stakeholders, including civil society, tribal authorities, chiefdom authorities, the chiefs, the authorities in the rural areas, because most of these children are from the rural areas because they are poor, so they are vulnerable. And you must have the police on board, but not only the police, like one of my colleagues had mentioned before, customs officers as well, immigration officers as well. Sometimes you travel with a child, and the child is not your child. Your names are different, and no question is being asked as to where you're taking the child to. We need some form of legislation in which you cannot just take a child that is not your child without the relevant documents. If you're traveling to a country in the West, and you're together with a child that is not your biological child, you are definitely asked questions at the immigration post. You are asked, what is your relationship with this child? If you're going to the US or the UK, they will definitely ask you those questions. We don't ask questions. We just assume it's your brother's child or your sister's child or your auntie's child, and you're taking care of the child. We should be asking questions to raise the alarm in the event that there's something suspicious. What is the impact of this body? It has brought in safe residential care for 6 to 12 months for these victims, short-term clinical care that addresses the survivors' physical and spiritual health, psychological and social needs, legal support. They've been given some legal support, reintegration support for victims, and a case management services. So they're doing quite a bit in the parts in Sierra Leone. We have the role of the IOM. We are all aware, and I'm sure the IOM is everywhere. And they're playing a part too. By October this year, they have set up 14 district task forces to help in decentralization of the National Task Force, which head office is in Freetown. We have the head office that deals with the National Task Force, but that office is in Freetown, the city of Sierra Leone. We don't have bodies in the rural areas, but they have now set up 14 district task forces in the rural areas, which is a big help. They help to increase victims and potential victims' access to information. As my sister was saying a few minutes ago, we need access to information. Protection and justice mechanisms. Avoid procedural delays in prosecuting. My sisters too have mentioned that. There should not be delay in prosecuting. And involvement of all stakeholders, which is so paramount, including traditional, religious authorities, police, FSU, which is the Family Support Unit, youth committees, motorbikers union, teachers, radio journalists. All these stakeholders should be on board for it to be a success, because they all play a part. They all play a part, and they know what is going on one way or the other. As you would know, and I know most of us have that common, some of our boundaries are porous. So you can take a child from Sierra Leone into the Republic of Guinea easily with no issues involved. You just take them. You can hire a bike, a motorbike, and get the driver to drive, and you sit with the child at the back, and off you go into Guinea, as long as you pay. And you have your ID card, you can just go in. So, easy trafficking. In West Africa, as I mentioned from my sister from Benin, we have common issues, very common issues. Logistical issues. We lack national coordination from state to state. We have language difficulties. French, Portuguese, English, we have language difficulties. There's also the politics, the rivalries between countries. There's the absence of contact points between countries, and there's lack of communication guidelines and instructions. There's also lack of technical communication means. And constraints in investigation of transnational crime. That is due to not only financial, but also educational. We need to educate our investigators, the police, the customs. We need to get them educated on transnational crimes. And for that, you need money and you need some expertise. We have insufficient knowledge and resources to properly collect information on these activities. We need to collect information on these activities so we can share it amongst ourselves and use it. We have the West African Coast Initiative. They have done quite a bit. They render technical assistance, they build capacity for better national, regional, international enforcement cooperation. They create transnational organized crime units and exchange information and intelligence, national capacity, including vulnerable countries in West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, and they contribute to the security sector reform. We have legislations in Sierra Leone, which I mentioned the last time. We still have just the Anti-Human Trafficking Act of 2005, and it criminalizes trafficking. We have sex trafficking too, which is criminalized. We have the Child Rights Act, which criminalizes prostitution of a child, and the penalties are all stated there. And we have the Sexual Offences Act 2012, which passed legislation for 15 years of imprisonment, but now in Sierra Leone, because there is the political will, we have just passed a new sexual offenses bill this year, in which rape and sexual penetration is life imprisonment. It's no longer 15 years, but it's life imprisonment because of the increase in cases. And settlement of these cases by family and bodies is 10 years imprisonment, because we all know that most of the problems we have is the settlement of these cases by the family, by the local authorities, and we also have now the measures that will be used for combating. We need to be reviewing legislation to strengthen the investigative and prosecutorial capacities, national action plans, classification of the crime as a grave criminal offense, as is done in the case of rape and sexual penetration. In Sierra Leone, we have not reached that awareness stage. We need to reach the stage where we can say human trafficking is like rape and sexual offense. And then it will ring a bell, and put in place measures to identify, protect, and support victims. And of course, we need coordination of all stakeholders. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Your Honor, and I'm happy that the political will finally managed to pass the new sexual offences bill. So thank you for that progress, for reporting on that.